G'day guys, how's it going? My name is Mr. Clayfield. I'm here with a deck profile for you on a list I actually used quite well recently at a local competitive. Local competitives are set up in the same way as a League Cup to help like new players prepare for that kind of formatting. I got top 8 with this list. I could have gone a bit further, but sadly I did prize my Switch in Game 3 against Articuno Lock, which was a bit unfortunate, but it happens, you know. We roll with that. But I wanted to show off this list because I think it was a really cool concept. I'd go from there. So, people who know me, who have seen my recordings before, and it's been a hot minute since I've done one, I'm sorry about that, but they will know that I am a person who likes to go in depth. I think that there are a lot of facets of this game, and one of the things that I'm the strongest at, I think, is just analysis. And so when it comes to deck building, I pride myself on that, and I was really happy with how this deck played. So I wanted to talk about that, the changes I would make going forward with this deck, and the matchup spread that I kind of felt with the deck. So, this is Arceus Pikachu Aerodactyl, otherwise known as APA. So, the strategy with this deck was basically to say the 3 most played decks in format are Lugia, Lost Box, and Mew. What deck can beat all of them? And that was what I kind of came up with as the basis of it. I can beat those 3 decks, and I paired all of them on the day of competitive, that I feel I can go from there and win. So, I felt really good with that. I will explain matchups kind of afterwards. I'm just going to explain how a lot of these cards work first. First and foremost, I will just talk about how the deck came about. So, I knew it going into this event that I should have played Lugia, but I decided not to. I was in like a little bit of a testing group with a couple of my friends, and we were tossing around these ideas, and I saw this list from Michael Catrone, where he played, it was like Arceus with the 1-1 Aero line, and I had a 1-1 Espeon VMAX line. I was like, that's pretty cool, but the Espeon feels like it gets countered by a lot of the meta right now, like people are kind of expecting it, so I didn't feel like it was as good. So I decided, okay, well, what can I do instead? I also talked to Michael about the list, and he mentioned how a lot of matchups you just scooped, and I was like, nah, I can't be having that. I can't be having matchups where I'm just instantly scooping. So I was like, okay, what can I do from there? From the initial, like, skeleton that Catrone made, how can I fix it? And that's how I came up with this list. It ran pretty well. I went 3-1-1 in Swiss with my last game, probably my last match being an ID. Then unfortunately lost in the first round of Top Cup, but it happens. I'm going to break down this list now. Hopefully you guys enjoy that. Let's get into it. So, obviously we have the 4-3 Arceus line. Arceus V-Star is our primary V-Star ability that we are going to use in this game. Starbirth is fantastic. It just allows us to get all the pieces that we need to set up on our opening turns. It allows us to go really strong in the game. It's also a really good like mid-game V-Star ability to use. There were a lot of times in certain matchups where I didn't need to shotgun the Arceus ability and could use it a lot later in the game because some of my other Pokemon were more threatening, so they'd go to kill them. It would leave the Arceus with the ability to do some really good late-game shenanigans. Trinity Nova, obviously insane. Being able to search our deck for 3 basic energy attachments with our Vs sets up all of our Pokemon. The really important thing is with this deck that every Pokemon that could attack in the deck required colorless energy most of the time. So like Pikachu VMAX requires 2 colors, Aerodactyl V-Star requires 2 colors, and even a Shadow Rider Calyrex requires 2 colors. So that allowed us to run a decent split of energy with the 4 double turbo to basically get all of these guys alive. Not to mention like Drapion in a bind, you could attach 2 energy to that and then go double colorless. It's just swinging under path if you need to be. Like, there were the times where that would come in handy for sure. So that was a big factor with the deck, with Arceus kind of setting these up. Like Arceus, people have a love-hate relationship with the card because sometimes it's really good, sometimes it's really bad. I found it was really fine today. I designed my list in a way where I knew that there were a lot of basics. Like I've got, was it 5, 7, 8, 11, 12, 14 basics. So I said, okay, I'll run 4 Arceus and 3 Flying Pika. So there's a 50% chance in every game that I am opening one of the best starters. And I take that. Like, you know, you can design your list in ways where you don't run any of these tech cards and you say like, all right, well, we just didn't open it. But there's a lot of matchups where like opening some of the other pieces are actually really strong. Like opening Drapion can be terrifying for Mew, depending on what their board state is. But opening Aerodactyl is insane against Lugia. So yeah, I felt like the Pokemon lines were pretty ideal. We have a Crobat in here because it allows us to draw some more cards. We have 2 Drapion V. The reason we have the 2 Drapion V is because this is obviously for the Mew matchup. Its Wild Style ability meant that I could basically just drop this Drapion, and if the Mew had a full bench, I could immediately hit for 190 The 60 damage was like inconsequential a lot of the time. There was never situations where the damage came up, so that was all good. I found that running 2 of this card was really important to winning the Mew matchup, because if you go first, you just set up normally, you're just chilling, your Arceus is there, it's whatever. If they mellow donk you, it sucks, don't get me wrong, but it is a recoverable position, potentially. You can recover by using a Flying Pikachu VMAX to then kill the Meloetta, and then if nothing dies on the next turn, you respond immediately by going with one Drapion and then another Drapion after that. So it just depends what your board state is and what you have access to. But the other big thing about Drapion is there are situations where you can force Mew to, like, you only lose the matchup, I will say, if Meloetta gets the turn 1 KO. That is the only way you lose this matchup, because if you go first and they don't get it, then you can just, like, Gust kill a Meloetta or KO a Mew with Arceus and then set up your board, and you only need 4 more prizes, so you can go, I'll kill a Meloetta, I'll kill a Mew, because they can't attack with 2 Meloettas in that game. It's just not going to happen with their energy, unless they like are a god and play their power tablets correctly. Usually you should be able to set up a win with 2 Drapion. If they go first, depending on what they have in active, Drapion is still insane, because you can just like Lumo for a boss up a Mew, kill it with Drapion, they're then forced to go in with Meloetta, you kill the Meloetta with an Arceus on the next turn, and then you don't use the Drapion just yet, you like leave it holding there, or use Arceus to kill like another V and then say, well, I'm threatening game with a Drapion again. So there's a lot of cool different pressure points, but I felt like when I paired into Mew, I couldn't lose with 2 Drapion if they just didn't get the donk. And I know, like, obviously they could get the donk, but it's Mew. It doesn't always happen, and that's an out that you play to. You're saying they just won't sack you. The more interesting line, I guess, in this deck is the Aerodactyl one. Rockrush is actually not a bad attack. There are certain matchups like Duraludon where if they don't have the big Parasol, you can actually just thin out all their fighting energies, and that can come up sometimes. But the main reason we have this is for the V-Star. Lost Dive is actually a really good attack in some matchups. Like I said, Duraludon is a main one because with Flying Pikachu and Arceus, the issue is that Arceus hits for 180, and the Duraludon can just say, okay, well, I'll Hyper Potion that, and you won't be able to kill it on the crackback. Whereas with Aerodactyl, if you fully set it up using like basic energies, Lost Dive does 240, they heal 120 of that, but even with a big chunk, they are dying to the next Lost Dive and they can't kill you in response. They can only do it if they Karen's Conviction, but it's like really convoluted, and like you set up a way where like they just can't do that. The real reason we play this guy is because of Ancient Star. So Ancient Star is a fantastic V-Star power, which is really only relevant for the Lugia matchup. If you go first in the Lugia matchup and you attach to an Aero V, you are in a very strong position, because if you get this V-Star into the active and declare Ancient Star, as long as this Aerodactyl is in play, it is path to the peak for all of your opponent's Pokemon. They can't bump it, they can't stop it, and it basically, I wouldn't say auto wins, but it gives you a very good chance of beating Lugia, because as long as this Aero is in play, they can never Summoning Star, which means they can never Archeops. And they have to attach energies, and you have ways to disrupt them attaching energies in this deck, so this is pretty much curtains for them in that matchup. There are like a few other matchups where it does come up, like I have used in like testing, Ancient Star was good into Duraludon, because as long as that Aero stayed in play, then we didn't care about Duraludon's abilities either. And also you could go like Ancient Star on the turn when they have like the Arceus in play in the active, and maybe they didn't get off the Trin Charge, and then they like can't Starbirth on the next turn, so like that could be kind of clutch as well. But yeah, Aero was primarily in here as a 1-1 line to deal with the Lugia matchup. If you went first into the matchup, you should not be able to lose unless like something important is prized. That's that can be a bit of a problem. But moving on, we have our Flying Pikachu V line. Now this is obviously a classic. So like Azul, I think, was the first person to run the Arceus Flying Pikachu combo, because like the format was dominated by Palkia at the time. And Pika was just the best foil for that, because in that meta, the Pikachu VMAX with a Lightning and a Double Turbo hit 280 with weakness, so like, sorry, 140 on its base damage for Max Balloon, but that went to 280, which was a perfect knockout for a Palkia. So that worked out quite well, and it still works out pretty well in our format, because Lugia V-Star has 280 HP. And so Pikachu still meets those parameters really nicely. Now, yes, I know V-Guard Energy exists, but you have to remember that in this list, not only can we just fully set up a Pikachu to be just its base power of 320 which will kill Lugia through V-Guard, we are also running 2 copies of Fan of Waves, which we use to put the V-Guard energy to the bottom of the deck and then KO the Lugia. So Pikachu was really strong. The other reason I liked it was because it just gave us a free pivot. We didn't have to run the air balloon that Catrone ran in his initial list. We had this, so we could just run more switching cards, which allowed us to then pivot into the Pikachu, which was really, really strong. Max Balloon also was fantastic for the Lost Box matchup. I realized that a Pikachu with a big Parasol, basically on its own, could solo the Lost Box matchup. That was the kind of strategy that I had going into that one, was that Pikachu on its own pretty much just did the job. Then we have Pumpkaboo. This is basically in here because of Pumpkin Pit. It gave us an out to our own path to be able to use abilities and then chuck down another path again. It also was quite handy in the Mew matchup because, like I said, you could bench an Arceus, attach an energy to it, and then you could pivot your Pumpkaboo in the active with like a Flying Pika on the bench as well, and say, well, if you have Rope, I'm going to let you kill my Flying Pika, and then I'll go in with Arceus, kill you, try and set up some things, and go like Drapion for game. Just hope they miss one turn. But yeah, Pumpkaboo, pretty essential for that. One of the more interesting cards we have in this list is the Shadow Rider Calyrex V. Now, this is primarily in here because of Shadow Mist, which says during your opponent's next turn, they can't play any special energy or stadium cards from their hands. Now, this is good for a couple of matchups, and I'm going to adapt this card a little bit in the future, or like the cards we're running in the deck to make it even stronger. But primarily what this was used for was for Mew builds that didn't run Fusion Strike energy, that just ran Double Turbo, or Mew builds that were like they were down like say 3 Fusion Strike energies and only had like 1 left, because Shadow Mist against them, or like just the Double Turbo build, the combination was going Fan of Waves to get rid of the only engine in play, and then going Shadow Mist to say, you can't attach that energy again. As long as this Calyrex is constantly attacking, you can't out that. This was also really good into Zorobox, because Zorobox only runs special energy. So you Fan of Waves once, you attach a big Parasol. You need the big Parasol on the Calyrex because of Doom Curse Zoroark. So you stop that completely by running the Parasol, and then just with constant Shadow Mists, you will eventually just win the game. By the time they have an out for it, you are already generating so much card advantage and probably just killing something with that many pings. You're chilling. You can also like ping it between 2 Pokemon with Shadow Mist, and then just set up the Calyrex and then go, cool, I've done that, now I'm going to Astral Barrage and kill both. And if you don't have any more like Zoruas in play because of that, I just win. So it was a pretty insane card. This was the one card I didn't get to use on the weekend, because in the Mew matchup, Drapion just kind of did the work because it wasn't the Double Turbo version, and again, didn't pair into Zorobox. The other matchup this is really solid into is Reggie's, but it is much better with another card that I'm going to be adding in the end that I'll kind of show you. Last Pokemon we're running is the Lumineon. Basically, it's in here because it's like Tapu Lele GX. It has Luminous Sign. We bench it. We search out a supporter. This was really handy to get some of our like lower count supporters, but it was also really good for us to make like really important pushes on certain turns to like punish our opponent. I was tempted to run the 1 Water Energy like Catrone did, but I decided against it. I just felt that Lumo was not something I wanted to bench that often. It was more utility. But yeah, that's the Pokemon count. Going into our items, we have 1 Evolution Incense. This is basically just in here because we run the 4 Ultra Ball to search for any Pokemon, and we have the Quick Balls for basics. I wanted the 1 Evo because there were times where you didn't want to discard cards in your hand, but you wanted to get the card you wanted. So you could Raihan or Starbirth, or thin out for it. It was just an extra card to have to thin out of the deck that wouldn't cause you to lose the cards in your hand. We have 2 Fan of Waves. This came up in a multitude of matchups. This is one of the best cards I played on the day because for Lugia, it got rid of the not Hiding Dark. It got rid of the V-Gun energies to allow Pikachu to get KOs. But there were also times where it got rid of like a powerful colorless energy, which can be really clutch. And when you get the lock with Aero, this gets rid of their Double Turbo energies, which is the only way they can really push for an attack to hit the Aerodactyl. So really, really clutch card. This is also good into Mew because I was able to like spin 1 energy back and then KO the thing that had all the energy left on the play. So they had like no energy in play, had to Sparkle, they couldn't afford to boss. Was really good in that sense. And then also this card came up clutch in my Duraludon matchup. My opponent went first with Duraludon. They had an Arceus and active Duraludon on the bench. They attached Double Turbo, preparing to Ultimate Ray next turn. Not Ultimate Ray, Trinity Nova, sorry. Wrong card. And I pushed on my turn. I think I Crobatted, I Lumoed, I dug as much as I could to get the turn 1 play of Aero, Pika, Lumo, Crobat on the bench with an attachment to my active Arceus. I then got to the Fan of Waves to bounce the energy back from my opponent, put Path in play, knowing that I was holding an Arceus V-Star and a basic energy in hand. Well, no, it wasn't even a basic energy. I used Trin Charge, attached one to active, and then one onto each of the bench guys, so a double turbo attach meant both of them were online. I just sat there and said, like, go ahead. Like, I'm just chilling. And that basically just blew out the entire matchup, and I was able to just sweep it from there. So yeah, Fan of Waves was an incredibly strong card, really good within this meta. Like I said, we had the 4 quick, the 4 ultra. We had the 1 switch. This was primarily in here for if I opened any of my like dead pieces, it allowed me to just search out Arceus. Arceus would search his card out to just get me out of the situation. I kind of wanted to chuck in an escape rope. There were a couple of times where rope would have been kind of huge to have as well. I do think the deck needed like 1 more switch out card, so that's definitely something I would consider for the future. I was running 4 Path to the Peak. I will be absolutely honest with you guys. This was one of the weaker cards that I played on the day. This only really came up against Duraludon, and it wasn't even that impactful, to be perfectly honest. I think that I could have beaten Duraludon by just attaching basic energy, but yeah, the Path didn't really do that much into anything else. So for me, this is probably one of the easier cards to actually cut from the list, because another strategy you have against Dura is that you can attack with Drapions, and that's kind of like fine. You just charge them up and they can kind of go. Yeah, Path actually felt pretty lackluster with my list. I actually lost more games than I won with Path to the Peak, to be real with you. In terms of supporters, we had 2 Boss's Orders, just for Gusting. We had 4 Marnie because it comboed really well with Path to the Peak. We had 2 Research just to, you know, just research. We had 1 Raihan. This is a bit of a weird card. It came up a couple of times. It's basically just in here as a recovery aspect. There were a lot of times where Raihan was able to save me from like a really poor start and allowed me to kind of extend into better plays. And I think for Arceus decks, it's really important to have 1 copy of this. It just allows you to have so much recovery from like a Meloetta Donk to be able to push with some other things and, you know, go from there. I ran 1 Serena. It was probably like the weakest card that I played on the day though, like next to Path. They were like they're the 2 areas where I'm probably going to cut and put in better cards. Serena just didn't come up that much. I didn't really ever need it to draw cards. I never really needed to gust. The 2 boss was more than enough. I ran 2 copies of Big Parasol. This is basically Wash Water Energy, but on a tool card. So this created a perfect combination with our Flying Pikachu. So with Max Balloon, we prevent all damage done, but that doesn't stop things like Sableye or a Veltal, so that's where the Parasol came in, and it became like the perfect foil for the deck. With that combination, Pikachu became a bit of a juggernaut into the Lugia and the Lost Box matchups, and it's what carried me to a lot of success on the day. Now going into the energies, we have the 4 Double Turbo, pretty straightforward, it's just a really strong energy. Ran 1 Capture. I was floating up between Capture Energy, Powerful Colors, or V-Guard. The V-Guard temptation was that with a V-Guard energy on it, Flying Pikachu has 340 HP and cannot be KO'd by a Lugia V-Star at all. So usually you can go Flying Pika with a V-Guard energy and a big Parasol, kill 1 Lugia. You'll then kill the next Lugia that tries to attack you, no matter what, and go from there. And then you have like 1 more attacker after that. So like, it mapped out really well. You could basically just have a board state of like 2 Flying Pikachu VMAXs and an Arceus and probably win. The issue was they could just boss the other Pikachu, so I decided against it. And I liked Capture more because it allowed me to just get certain pieces onto my board and get off good attacks. Like, it was the perfect thing when you do like a double turbo attached to Arceus. Instead of searching out the Pokemon you wanted, you search out the Capture to attach that, not waste your basic energy, get the Pokemon you need on your bench, and then Trinity Nova onto it. It was really clutch. Then we ran 2 Fighting, 3 Lightning, 2 Psychic, because we need the Psychic for the Shadow Rider, we need the Fighting for the Arrow, and the Lightning for the Pika. But it's low counts of each because most of those Pokemon only need 1 of those energies at a time. So that worked out quite well, only needing the 7 energies. And the rule of thumb a lot of times with Arceus decks is 7 basic energy means that you can usually set up 2 different Pokemon over time with Nova or just attachments. So that was the main reason why I ran that. So that was the list. Going into the event, that's how I felt. We went into round 1. I paired Lugia V-Star. I won game 1 because of Flying Pikachu. It was just a house and got me that game. Game 2, I got absolutely blown out by just not having a way to stop the turn 2 Lugia setup. I was just a little bit too far behind to be able to respond. Couldn't find the Parasol for the Pikachu, so the moment he got the Yveltal KO, I just scooped it up. We get to game 3. I open Aero V plus Energy, so I'm threatening V-Star. I find a way to get to V-Star on my next turn. I Ancient Star my opponent. They try and attach some energies to make some things happen. I Fan of Waves a couple of times in a row, and then eventually find my way to setting up a Pikachu VMAX with a big Parasol to basically just seal the game from there. And they scooped it up after I took enough knockouts to win, even if time was called. It was a pretty close one. He did kind of slow play near the end, but I was able to kind of squeak it out to get the victory. Into round 2, I actually played one of my testing partners who brought like a really greedy Mew list, but that is where Double Drapion came in super clutch. Game 1, I went first. He couldn't get the Meloetta Donk on me, and so I was able to respond with a Trinity Nova KOing the Meloetta. He then responded with a Mew VMAX kill. I responded to the Mew VMAX kill with a Drapion. He then brought up another Mew to kill that Drapion, and I Drapioned him again. So Double Drapion was insane. Game 2, he chooses to go first. He leaves the Mew V in the active, so I immediately kill it with a Drapion. He then tries to attack me with a Meloetta, and I'm able to go Raihan onto the Arceus to then KO that, holding the Drapion in hand using the Starburst, knowing he didn't run Disruption. So then next turn, when he KO'd me with a Mew VMAX, that was the only thing that could KO the Arceus that was in play. I was able to follow up with another Drapion to just close that game out. So very, very clean. Double Drapion, like I said, feels really, really solid into that matchup. Go on to round 3. This is my only loss in Swiss. It was against Lost Box. They were running the Kyogre. One card I was definitely missing from my list, and it's definitely something I'm going to fix up for the future, is Sharon's Care. A lot of times I would open with the Arceus and it was fine, but the damaged Arceus was a bit of a liability, and if that Arceus V goes into the discard, it's an easy Echoing Horn target for them to push for game. With a Sharon's Care, I alleviate that, and if I just have 2 Pikachu VMAXs in play, both with big Parasols, I never lose the matchup whatsoever. So that was the biggest mistake that I made. Good to know I can fix it for next time though. I also lost that set because 2 out of 3 games I went first and had no energy to attach. The only game I actually won was the one where I actually got to go second, I think, and got the Trin Charge onto 2 Pikas. So yeah, that was pretty fortuitous. We go into round 4. I pair off against Duraludon. Again, that's where I got off that insane Fan of Waves play in Game 2. In Game 1, Path actually was pretty clutch. It allowed me to not have to overly invest in all my basic energies, and I could just go a bit more turbo, which was nice. But I do feel like I could go without the Path, and it would also be okay, because one of the cards that I would tech in for the Duraludon matchup is Echoing Horn, meaning that I just have to kill 1 Duraludon VMAX in the game, and then just kill an Arceus, which is pretty easy for my deck to do. So that would be the plan, at least. So got that win. We go 3-1. We have 3rd seed heading into the final round. I pair an opponent who's like 5th seed. We can easily ID, so we just take the ID and go check out Uniqlo. It's a pretty good time. And yeah, we finish as 3rd seed, and we get paired against the 6th ranked player, which is Palkia Inteleon. I breeze through Game 1. In Game 2, I just dead draw, but I have a Pikachu VMAX that takes 5 prizes, and I just drew into nothing. I took 5 prizes, and all the prizes I got were just absolutely dead cards. I did nothing. I had so many turns to just bench another Pokemon, attach an energy, and I'd win, but I just didn't find one. The deck just didn't decide to let me find one, which sucked. And we go into Game 3, and I prize my Switch, which loses me the game. So the takeaways, I guess, from the tournament that I felt was that all I really want to change is the Path count, well, just Path itself. Serena into Sharon's Care, I think, is a main change that I want to make. But that was about it. There wasn't actually too many other changes. So I want to show you what I'm thinking about in terms of how I would take this deck forward. The other thing to keep in mind as well with a deck like this is obviously it caught a lot of people by surprise and did well. So like I'd maybe take this to a major event if people weren't expecting a lot of these cards. But at my local, I do feel like people are going to be prepared for what this deck can do. So I may hold off on using it at locals again, because I think people are going to start teching for that stuff. So I can just start like bringing other stuff and just having a fun time. So yeah. Basically, the changes that I want to make, and I'm going to take you through them now from my initial playthrough of the deck. I think the energy count is pretty much perfect. Maybe one more energy would be nice. Like I said, the V-Guard would be cool, but it's not necessary, I think, for the deck. It doesn't have to have that. The first change is we take out the Serena, and we're also going to take out all 4 copies of Path to the Peak. A bit radical, but the only person that played Duraludon didn't do too hot with it, so I don't think we're going to need that. We are going to go to trainers. The first thing we are going to add is a copy of Sharon's Care. Sharon's Care is in here because it allows us to pick up our Arceus, which is really clutch, because it also happened in the Game 3 against Palkia, where the Articuno was set up, and I was a little bit worried, and I only had 2 Parasols. But what I could have done was attached a Parasol to my Palkia, took a KO, and said, okay, if you swing with your my Arceus, take a KO, and then if you swing in with your Palkia onto me, I can Sharon's Care pick this up, attach the big Parasol to my other Pika, both my Pikas then have Parasols, and I'm swinging for the fences, and there ain't a damn thing my opponent could then do about it. So Sharon's Care, also for the Lost Box matchup, is really clutch, so that's definitely getting added in. Now the stadium I'm going to put in, I'm only going to put in 1 copy of it. It is Collapse Stadium. So the reason we're running the Collapse Stadium is a couple of reasons why. One is that recently in the Champions League at Kyoto, I think it was Kyoto, I was about to call it Reginald because that's what we call it, Regigigas won the entire event. And one combo that we can actually do with our deck specifically, as I'll pan back out and show you, is the combination of using the Collapse Stadium, which says that only 4 Pokemon can be on the bench, and Shadow Mist. Because with Shadow Mist, my opponent can't play Stadium. So if I have a setup of Shadow Rider in the active and a Collapse Stadium in play, I lock the Regigigas player out for the rest of the game. They can't do anything. And with Fountain Waves, I can bump any energy that was already in play as well. So it's just a really easy lock for the Regi deck as well. The other benefit of Collapse Stadium is it is going to combo with another card that I want to add into the mix, which is Echoing Horn. Now, Echoing Horn, I think, is really important for our deck for a combination of reasons. There are a lot of times where Horn is just insane. A lot of decks are, quick to discard cards and not think about the consequences. I found that out with my own list against Lost Box. I got punished by Echoing Horn a lot. So that was good, though. It helped me learn to play around that in the future. And Horn's really good for our deck, primarily, I would say, for the Lugia matchup. And the reason for that is because there are situations where we can do some really cheeky plays with Collapse Stadium. So we can play a Collapse Stadium down, both have 4 Pokemon in play. I probably won't have that many in play, so what I could do on the follow-up then is bench my Pumpkaboo and use Pumpkin Pit to get rid of my Stadium, but that leaves a bench spot open for my opponent, and that's when I Echoing Horn back a Lugia V, which allows me to have another 2 prizes at a KO, so I don't have to worry about the Yveltal at all. I'm just sitting there with a big Parasol saying, whatever, you hit me there, I KO that, and if you have all these 1 prizes, I just get rid of one of them with Collapse, and then I go Pumpkaboo, then I go Echoing Horn, boss, that's game. So that to me seemed like a really good combination of cards there. So there were 2 more spots. Now I was thinking about what I wanted these to be. One card that I'm definitely going to add, because the more I think about it, the more I like it, is a Hisuian Heavy Ball. Because one of the big things in a lot of my matchups was you don't want to prize the important piece that wins you the game. So whether that is the Aero V, one of my Drapions, or even a Lumo or a Crobat or Pumpkaboo. A lot of those are really important, and the Shadow Rider especially. So Heavy Ball just means that I never have that issue. Because I was talking to Callum, who I played in the Mew matchup, and he said, oh, my only out is if you prize a Drapion. So with the Heavy Ball, you put yourself in a position of saying, as long as I don't prize both of them, I'll be okay. So Heavy Ball is definitely an addition I want. Now the last slot is a bit of a toss-up. There are 2 cards that I want to add, and I'm not sure which one I think is better. Or what I'll leave it up to you is in the comments below, let me know what you think this last card should be. Because to me, it's wide open. I think there are a bunch of cards that could be added here. I also want to talk about the debate of Marnie and Research in this list as it is changing. So obviously, without Path, Marnie isn't as impactful. The reason I'm going to keep it at the counts that it is, though, is because with Marnie, it allows me to not lose any of my important resources. Because if I run lots of research and I'm holding a Pikachu VMAX or an Aero in hand, it sucks to lose that if I can't get the setup that I want. Whereas with Marnie, I never lose them. So I think I'm going to keep it as Marnie. I could run Judge as well, but I'm probably not going to. So the 2 cards that I'm thinking of adding for this list to make it a bit smoother, one of them is a copy of Escape Rope. I like Escape Rope because it's like Switch, but it's almost like Boss as well. There are times, like I said, where your opponent's going to bring up the Yveltal or just a random single prize and be like, I'm going to stall with this, and you can say, nope, we're going to rope here, and we're going to force you to bring a different Pokemon up, and I think that's pretty strong, so that's definitely on the short list. The other card, like I said, that I am considering is the V-Guard Energy. So the reason for that, like I said, is the Pikachu situation, where with a V-Guard Energy attached to it, the Lugia can never KO it. So the Pikachu is basically invincible for a turn. If I've just KO'd a Lugia, and I KO another Lugia with that Pikachu, then we're kind of chilling. The issue, like I said, with that situation is I can just gust the other Pikachu that's in play, but it doesn't deal with the issue of the Pikachu VMAX that's already in play, then getting the kill and having the Parasol. It does mean we would lose to like a Lost Vacuum, but we lose to that anyway. So to me, V-Guard Energy is tempting. Gardevoir just doesn't get the numbers right, because a Radiant Gardevoir means your Pikachu has 330 HP, but that is enough for a Lugia with all powerful colors and a belt to get KO. Another card to consider is potentially like Temple of Sinnoh. Isn't bad as well. It could also be some supporters, like I know Birdkeeper was floated around. For me, I think it's the Rope. At least for now, I think it's the Rope, because Rope gives me another out to the Power Clock as well, which is really important. But the main reason I want it is because Rope gives me another card like Switch to allow me to actually get my Arceus or my Pikachu into the active as soon as possible. If I open any of my other pieces and I'm stuck for a turn, I can be set too far behind and it makes it really hard to come back. So I think the Rope provides a lot of benefit in that scenario. Plus, Rope can be pretty deadly if my opponent puts up like a Pokemon they are fine with losing. So it's like really good into the Mew matchup if they just leave the Mellow active, right? And I just choose to go second and say, cool, you've only left Mellow active, but you haven't benched another Mellow or an Oricorio. I can just find Rope here. I don't have to use Boss. I can use Rope and get the same result, which is really, really strong. So yeah, this is the kind of updated version of the list, guys.